The envelope came on a Tuesday. Amara Ose almost threw it away. It was too white, too thick. The kind of white that didn't belong in the Tema neighborhood where she rented a workshop the size of a generous bathroom, where the ceiling fan worked only when it felt like it, and where the smell of solder and red oil stew competed for dominance every afternoon when Mama Essie cooked next door through the shared wall. She turned the envelope over. The seal on the back was red and gold and featured what appeared to be a lion having an argument with a unicorn. She put it down. She picked it up again. She called her mother. "Mama, there is a letter here from Buckingham Palace." Silence. "Then, Amara, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything." "You did something." "Mama, I told you about that prayer group. I told you. You cannot mix the Anglican prayers with the—" "Mama, it's not a curse. I think it might be an invitation." More silence, longer this time. The kind of silence her mother deployed when she was recalculating her entire understanding of the universe. "To the palace." "Yes. In England. There is only one Buckingham Palace." "Amara," her mother's voice dropped to the register she reserved for serious theological matters. "Did you apply for something?" She had 8 months ago. A Commonwealth Innovation Fellowship, Frugal Medical Technology, the brief said. High-impact tools built from low-cost, locally sourced materials. She had submitted a 4-page application at 2 in the morning, half asleep, eating ginger biscuits, not expecting anything. She had forgotten about it by Thursday. The letter was real. The reception was in 6 weeks. She owned one blazer. It was burgundy. She had bought it for her uncle's funeral in 2019 and had not worn it since because it made her feel, she had written in her journal at the time, like a very small, very sad politician. She ironed it anyway. She almost didn't bring the device. That was the thing she would think about later, on the plane, somewhere over the Mediterranean, eating a bread roll that tasted like a memory of bread. She almost left it in Accra. It wasn't that she was ashamed of it exactly. It was more that she knew what it looked like. It looked like something a clever child made for a school science fair and then forgot to pretty up. The cuff was cut from bicycle tire rubber, the dense inner tube kind, bought from the Tema Motor spare parts market for 4 Ghana cedis. The pressure bulb was repurposed from a blood pressure kit she had salvaged from a clinic disposal pile. The gauge linked to a phone speaker component she had reconfigured to register oscillation frequency at systolic peaks. The whole thing was held together with a combination of adhesive, optimism, and a very specific type of cable tie available only from one stall in the Makola market, run by a man named Kofi who had never once in 15 years of trading been able to explain where he sourced them. Total cost of materials, approximately $3. Accuracy rate against gold standard clinical monitors in her 200-person field trial across 4 communities in the greater Accra region, 97.3%. She wrapped it in a cloth. She put the cloth in a plastic bag, the orange kind with the red printing that said TEMA Best Market in letters that had been slightly misprinted. So it actually said TEMA Best MARKE. She put it in her carry-on. She put her carry-on in the overhead locker. She sat down. She spent 4 hours of the flight quietly convincing herself that, when she got to London, she would leave the bag in her hotel room and present only her research slides like a normal person. She did not leave it in the hotel room. Buckingham Palace was bigger than she had been prepared for by any photograph or documentary or mental simulation she had attempted on the Heathrow Express. She had stood in front of it for a full minute on the pavement before going in, not out of awe exactly, more out of a specific kind of assessment she did with large things, the way you look at a wave before you decide whether to swim toward it or sideways. The wave, in this case, was approximately 108 meters wide and had 775 rooms. Inside, it smelled like old flowers and money. Not the aggressive smell of new money. The quiet smell of money that had been sitting in the same rooms for so long it had stopped being money and become something else entirely, a kind of atmospheric pressure. The ceilings were the height of a problem she could not yet name. The chandeliers were individually larger than her workshop. The carpet beneath her feet was the exact deep red of something that had decided, centuries ago, that it would simply never wear out. She adjusted the strap of her bag. The plastic TEMA Best MARKE bag crinkled. A man near her turned slightly. She held the bag more still. The other innovators arrived in clusters. She watched them from near a side table where someone had arranged enough canapes to feed her street for a week. They were from 17 Commonwealth nations. She had read the list. They were, without exception, polished. Not unkindly polished, just finished. The kind of people who had practiced their 30-second elevator pitches until the pitches no longer sounded practiced. The kind of people who wore their lanyards with the ease of people who had worn many lanyards. A young man from Singapore had brought a tablet display. It was rotating a 3D render of his device. The render was backlit. It had its own ambient soundtrack, very subtle, barely a hum. A woman from Kenya had a printed brochure, properly bound, with a QR code on the back. A man from Australia had what appeared to be an actual functioning prototype, embedded in a custom Perspex case, with integrated LED underlighting. Amara looked at her plastic bag. The plastic bag said TEMA Best MARKE. She ate a canapé. It was very small and tasted of cream cheese and the specific sadness of things that are described as elegant. She ate 3 more. Phase 3, the wall in a suit. His name was Sir Edmund Calloway, and he arrived at her table the way weather systems arrive, preceding himself, displacing air. He was tall in the way that men who have never had to justify their height are tall. His suit was the color of a London sky deciding to rain. He had the particular kind of silver hair that did not suggest aging so much as authority having reached its final, most refined form. He was, she would learn later from the program booklet, a senior advisor to 3 WHO medical equipment standardization bodies, and the founding chair of something called the Global Medical Device Quality Assurance Consortium. He looked at her table. He looked at the plastic bag. His expression did not change. That was the thing. A man with less practice would have let something flicker across his face. Sir Edmund Calloway had spent 30 years in rooms exactly like this one. And he had learned, truly mastered, the art of not letting his assessment show until he was ready to deliver it with the full weight of his credentials behind it. He extended his hand. Edmund Calloway, you must be the Ghana entry. Amara Os, she shook it, yes. Blood pressure monitoring, I believe. He glanced at the program. Adaptive oscillometric sphygmomanometry. Locally sourced materials, field validated, designed for last mile. May I? He gestured toward the table. She unwrapped the device. He looked at it for a moment. The silence was precisely long enough to be a statement. Interesting. He picked it up. He turned it over. This is bicycle rubber. Inner tube rubber, yes. The density profile is actually more consistent than. And this gauge mechanism. Repurposed oscillometric sensor, reconfigured to. How much? She knew what he was asking. $3 US equivalent. He set it down. Right, he smiled. It was a complete smile, technically without flaw. And your accuracy data, this is from a field trial. 200 participants, 4 communities compared against. Self-reported, presumably, no clinical oversight. The trial was supervised by 2 registered nurses and a community health officer at each site. Data was cross-referenced against. Of course, he was already making a small note on his program booklet. The challenge with this type of approach, and I say this constructively, you understand, is that field conditions are enormously variable. Material consistency alone, the rubber, for instance, you're sourcing from market suppliers. Batch variation. Temperature effects on elasticity. What works in one trial in Accra may not reproduce in Nairobi or Colombo. Everything he said was technically true. He knew it, she knew it. He also knew that a $400 clinical monitor had a failure rate in rural clinics of 34% due to power inconsistency, humidity damage, and the impossibility of replacing proprietary components when they broke. He knew that 1.4 billion people globally lived beyond reliable access to any validated blood pressure monitoring. He knew all of this because it was in the literature he had helped write. He simply chose not to bring it up. Something to consider as you develop the concept further, he said, and moved toward the Singapore tablet display. She watched him go. She picked up the device, held it for a moment, set it back down on the table. She ate another canapé. It still tasted like elegant sadness. He was taller than the photograph suggested, which was the thing people always said about Prince William, and which was somehow still surprising every single time it was true. He worked the room the way, and she would think about this later, looking for the right comparison. The way a person works a room who has done this so many times, it is no longer performance and not quite natural either, but something third, something in between, a kind of graceful professional warmth that was genuinely warm even though it was also unquestionably professional. He spoke to the Singapore innovator for 4 minutes. The LED underlighting glowed tastefully. He spoke to the Kenya innovator for 5 minutes. The brochure was admired. He spoke to 7 others. He laughed at something the Australian said. He asked good questions, actual questions, the kind with follow-ups that proved he had listened to the first answer. Then he reached Amara's table. He looked at the device on the table. He looked at the plastic bag it had come out of. He looked at her. "Hello," he said, "tell me about this." And her brain, which had rehearsed this moment approximately 400 times on the flight and in the hotel room and in the car on the way to the palace, did the thing brains do when the real moment arrives after too much rehearsal. It went completely blank. "Hello," she said. "It's yes, hello, sir." She stopped. "Sir, Your Highness, sir." He blinked. She heard herself. "I mean Your Royal Highness, sir. Hello, I said hello already." She picked up the device. "This is the device. It measures blood pressure. It costs $3. I made it from bicycle tires." Something happened to his expression. Not pity, she would have felt that land differently. Something more like genuine interest deciding to settle in for a while. "Bicycle tires," he said. "Inner tube rubber. The density is very consistent if you know which grade to source. The oscillometric sensor is from a repurposed phone speaker component. The whole system is calibrated to compensate for material variance using a..." She stopped. "It works. I've tested it on 200 people. Can I hold it?" She handed it to him. He turned it over the way a person turns something over when they are actually trying to understand it, not just performing the gesture of understanding it. He pressed the bulb once experimentally. He looked at the gauge. How accurate? 97.3% against gold standard clinical monitors. He looked up. "That's not a rounding error." "No, sir, Your Highness, sir." He laughed. "A real one. The kind that happens before the social filter can catch it." "You can just say, sir," he said. "I will try." What happens if the rubber tears? You buy more bicycle inner tube from any market in any country for less than 50 cents. He was quiet for a moment. "And if the sensor fails?" Same phone speaker component is in approximately 340 million handsets currently active in sub-Saharan Africa. It is, by definition, the most available component on the continent. He set it down carefully, not the way you set down something delicate, The way you set down something you want to keep looking at. Who validated this? I did, with 2 nurses and a health officer per site. The data is in my presentation materials. She reached into her bag and produced a printed staple-bound document, 14 pages, that she had printed at a Tema business center at 11 p.m. 2 nights before her flight, arguing with the printer for 40 minutes before it cooperated. He took it. He actually opened it. He read the first page. She waited. "This is impressive work," he said, and it was not the voice he used for the LED display or the printed brochure or the 7 other conversations. It was flatter, quieter, the register of someone saying a thing simply because it is true. Then the commotion started at the far end of the room. The sound was not dramatic. That was the thing nobody prepares you for, that real emergencies, when they begin, often sound like a piece of furniture being moved in the next room. A soft thud, a muffled exclamation, then a different quality of quiet spreading outward through a crowd, the way cold spreads from an open window. Lord something. She never got the full name. It would take her 2 days of news searching to piece it together. Had gone pale, and then sat down on the carpet in the way that people sit down when sitting down is not a choice. The room organized itself quickly. Palace staff materialized. Someone was on a phone. A woman in a green dress who turned out to be a cardiologist had moved to his side. 2 staff members appeared with medical kits, proper clinical kits, the kind that came in hard cases with latches. They opened the first kit. They produced a blood pressure monitor. Digital, clinical grade, the model she recognized from its WHO certification badge. It gave a reading. Then it gave a different reading. Then it gave the first reading again. The cardiologist frowned. She tried it twice more. She shook it slightly. The numbers changed each time in ways that were meaningfully inconsistent. Someone opened the second kit. A different brand, also certified, also expensive. Its battery indicator showed 12%. The reading it produced was, the cardiologist said quietly to the person beside her, not compatible with what she was observing clinically. There was a third device. A staff member was still unboxing it, hands moving faster than the box was designed for. Amara was watching all of this from 10 feet away. She looked down at her device. It was already in her hand. She didn't remember picking it up. She looked back at the cardiologist. She walked forward. "Excuse me." Her voice was quieter than she expected. "I have a blood pressure cuff. I know what it looks like, but it's validated to 97.3% accuracy. If you want to use it while you're waiting for." The cardiologist looked at the device. She looked at Amara. She looked at the device again. There was a moment, a very specific, very familiar moment that Amara had lived inside before, where someone is deciding whether to trust a thing based on what it looks like rather than what it does. The cardiologist took it. She applied it properly. She had good hands, the kind of hands built from years of clinical habit. She inflated the cuff. She watched the gauge. She recorded the number. She inflated it again. Same number. Third time. Same number within 1 point. She said the number to the person on the phone. She kept the device on the man's arm. It kept producing numbers that were consistent with each other, consistent with what she was seeing clinically, consistent in the way that a thing is consistent when it has been built to do one thing and has been built to do it well. The paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. They had their own equipment. The cardiologist gave them the numbers Amara's device had recorded. They nodded. Those numbers made sense to them. The man was taken out on a stretcher, conscious, talking, holding someone's hand. The room exhaled. Amara was wrapping the cuff back in its cloth when she felt the presence rather than heard it. Sir Edmund Calloway was standing 2 feet away. He was looking at the cloth in her hands. He said nothing. Not he started to say something and stopped. Not he opened his mouth and thought better of it. He simply said nothing, in the full and complete way of a man who has realized that every sentence currently available to him would cost him something he was not prepared to spend. She did not look at him. She did not say anything either. She put the cloth in the plastic bag. The bag crinkled. Tema best mark. She set it back on the table. The reception resumed in the slightly subdued, slightly elevated way that events resume after real things happen inside them. People spoke more quietly. They stood closer together. Someone brought tea. William found her in the garden. She didn't know how long she had been standing there. Long enough that the evening had gone from gray to the specific dark blue that London turns before full dark, a color she had no name for in Twi, and had not yet found an adequate name for in English. He came out through a side door. No entourage. One protection officer who stayed far enough back to be invisible. "Are you all right?" he said. "Yes, sir." She paused. "Sir." He stood beside her, looking at the garden, which was enormous and very still. "That was yours," he said. "In there, that was your device they used." "Yes." "How are you feeling?" She thought about it, a real think, not a polite one. "Strange," she said. "I have tested that device 200 times. I know it works. I have always known it works. But knowing it works in a workshop in Tema and then watching it work in that room in that situation," she stopped. "It's different," he said. "It's the same device. That's the thing. It's exactly the same device. Nothing changed about it." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, no, what changed was the room. She looked at him. "The room decided to take it seriously," he said. "The device didn't change. The room's willingness to look at it properly, that changed." 11 minutes. That was how long they stood there. She would not know that until later, checking the timestamp on the one photograph someone took through the garden window. Not of them specifically, just of the garden, but they were in it. Two small figures in the blue dark, both looking at something that wasn't the garden. He asked about the field trial, real questions, the methodology, the community health officers, the specific communities in Greater Accra. He asked about the cable ties from Kofi's stall at Makola and laughed when she explained that Kofi himself did not know where they came from. He asked what she needed. She told him, not money, though money would help. What she needed was a validation pathway that didn't require a $2 million clinical trial infrastructure she could not access. What she needed was a regulatory framework that recognized field-validated evidence from community settings as legitimate. What she needed, she said, and heard the plainness in her own voice with a kind of surprise, was for people like Sir Edmund Calloway to not be the last word. William was quiet. "He wasn't the last word tonight," he said. "No," she said, "he wasn't." He shook her hand before he went back inside, a proper handshake, the kind that comes with eye contact. She stood in the garden for a little while longer. The London dark settled completely. It was, she thought, a very particular shade of blue. Phase 7, what she caris home. She was back in Accra on a Friday. The workshop smelled like solder and Mama Essie's Contamire stew coming through the wall, which meant it was exactly as she had left it. The ceiling fan was not working, which also meant it was exactly as she had left it. She stood in the doorway for a moment with her carry-on still on her shoulder, and just let the smell and the heat and the specific broken fan silence of the place settle over her like something she had not known she was missing. Her mother called within 4 minutes of her phone, connecting to the local network. So her mother said, "How was the palace?" "Big." "How big?" "Very big, Mama." "And the prince, is he as tall as they say?" "Yes." "And did anything happen? Did they?" Her mother paused, recalibrating. In her mother's understanding of the world, Going to Buckingham Palace was the kind of event that ended with a certificate or a check or a title or some tangible external transformation that could be pointed to and explained to relatives. Did something happen? Amara set her bag down on the workbench. Something happened, she said. What? She looked at the bag. The orange one, TEMA Best MARKE. I'll tell you about it when you come for Sunday stew, she said. Bring the aunties, it's a good story. She hung up. She sat down at the workbench. She pulled out her notebook, the same green spiral one she had been using since January, 3/4 full of measurements and recalibrations and small fierce notes to herself in the margins. Things like check the Volta region batch and ask Kofi about the heavier cable tie. And once, in the bottom corner of a page about gauge sensitivity, just the word why not underlined twice. She opened it to the next blank page. She wrote a date at the top. She wrote a single line, begin version 2, lower the cost, raise the threshold. She picked up a pen. She looked at the blank page for a moment the way you look at a wave before you decide what to do about it. Then she began. Outside, the ceiling fan started working. It did not know why. It had simply, after months of being asked, decided.